let's hire 200 people and they'll sort it out. And you're like, no, they won't. This is not about more bodies. This is about the right approach with the right continuous model to be able to go from this is a problem, this is a potential solution. There's a multi-dimensional analysis of the impact and the value of data. The advent of AI, we have a new dimension to explore. We're still so focused on the technology that we haven't figured out that it's people that are not bound by the limitations of technology that are going to figure out how to deploy this technology effectively.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. Today's guest is Hugo Pinto, who has a wealth of experience in consulting with both early stage companies and enterprises going back many, many years, and specifically on AI. In the conversation, we dive into how corporations are correctly using AI, how they are incorrectly using AI, how you should be thinking about educating your team and aligning incentives for just leaning into generative AI. We also talk about the ethical aspect of sharing your data, the value of AI and data marketplaces that will be rising over the next decade, and how you can be applying this in your day-to-day work and life. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hugo is a wealth of experience and knowledge around generative AI and has clearly thought quite deeply about the impact and approach to effective corporate change and shifting towards leveraging AI and data in a primary way. I hope you enjoy this conversation and learn something. Cheers. What do you think the opportunities are that business is currently not really understanding, getting, or applying while we're sitting on this kind of goldmine opportunity of we have this new technology, where should it be leveraged, but it's not being used?
Yeah. So I think the biggest difference with Gen AI towards, for instance, the rest of the AI movement, which, to be honest, in enterprise has been around maybe for 7, 8, maximum 10 years. I think Gen AI gives us two paradigm shifts in parallel. One is the effort to create something that is useful is much lower than it was before. Because before you could even begin to think about deploying AI, you needed to do a bunch of work around data, around governance, around management, around quality. That made everything just so complex to build anything at scale. And even though, LLMs are still sort of nascent in being visible at an enterprise scale, it's much easier to build something meaningful, right? And I suspect that when we start seeing the same comparable use cases in domains like marketing, sales, content, media, communications, I suspect what's required to build and run that is going to be orders of magnitude smaller than what we needed to do with any of the previous generations of technology. That on one side, right? On the other side, from a user's perspective, it's indeed a paradigm shift that right now, the best users to leverage the technology are users that do not mandatorily have a technical background, but understand how to generate and evaluate that business outcome. That's where the real value is going to come from companies. And I think culturally, companies still have not adapted to this. So I still think there's a huge weight to put on technical capabilities and skills and not enough on the translation element, right? So it was funny, another conversation
Does that mean like it's a product manager role or a project manager?
Something like that, not project manager. I think project management is something that is done by someone that knows what they're trying to optimize towards, right? And a project manager by nature is someone that's trying to optimize volume and output, right? And if you go into the foundations of Agile, it's throughput and burn rates, right? And if you look at nowadays, it's productivity, it's impact. And to do that, you need to act as a product manager. You need to think about what's the impact for the users, what's the outcome for the business, right? So I think, some type of product manager. There's a lot of nuances depending on the area you're operating. So I think that's tremendously important. And that makes all the difference, because I think for the past 10 years, companies that have tried to build AI capabilities have focused on hiring almost like an AI CTO, which is the chief AI officer's archetype, right? A PhD in computer science, data science, knows the data landscape, the data technology landscape, is a master of figuring out what the best, MLOps configuration is a master at leveraging all of the best algorithms and the best vendors in the space. But what happens when now all of that happens in the background, right? Now what really matters is how you ask the question, and how you then iterate that question until, and even in how you ask the tool itself, the LLM, to help you build a way to set up that question. So it's orders of magnitude of change towards how we've developed this technology in the past. And I mean, I'll give you a very clear example. One of the companies I've worked with in my recent past had a team of 20 or 30 engineers to build one product every 3 to 6 months. And I've, over the past couple of years, or months, I've met a couple of startups that in 6 months and with between 6 and 12 people have built near production ready products that are on the market, right? It's quite impressive, right? So it is orders of magnitude in terms of speed, orders of magnitude in terms of effort, and orders of magnitude in terms of easiness of adoption, right? Now, if we think of big enterprises, the problem is it takes a long time for the message from a nervous receptor at the end of your arm to reach your brain, because there's so much management layer and so much, let's say, harmonization of information, that until a clear signal reaches the top for action, it's going to take a while. So I suspect the companies that are not decisive and strategic on how they do this probably are going to suffer a little bit, because they're going to lose a lot of productivity. And I think those gaps are going to be taken advantage of businesses like the ones I've described. So I think the future shape of enterprises is probably going to be much leaner and much more focused on impact, right?
Whenever we look at new technology, there's obviously kind of the initial adoption of it, and then there's the end up version that we can't really imagine. So, the internet in the 90s versus the internet in the
Yeah,
2010s looks very different in terms of how it's just the bedrock of absolutely everything.
absolutely.
So, we have these two kind of competing, maybe they're not competing, but two different camps. We have startups that are moving fast, small teams, like you said, that are building very quickly, leveraging AI. They're going to be native to AI, building in AI workflows and AI optimization from ground floor. And then we have kind of big corporate companies, larger enterprises that are, some will make the cut, some won't, right? Some will be agile and nimble and make the transition, some will not.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is for the companies that become the next generation of large companies. So not today's big companies, right? That successfully make the pivot. That'll be one type of archetype. The companies that become the large companies of the future. So what Facebook was in the early 2000s to Facebook now, Google in the late 90s or early 2000s to Google now. What does 10, 20 years in the future look like for the optimal structure of an organization? And we have the examples of Netflix and Google's and Meta's, but like I feel like there's a fundamental different structure, and maybe it's smaller teams, or maybe it's fewer people in general, and it's working hand with AI. Like, do you have an idea or sense of what that successful, built from the ground up AI company or technology company leveraging AI most effectively looks like in 10, 20 years?
It's, I mean, I'm going to be honest, if I knew that I would probably be on my way to becoming very successful and very rich in the next couple of
You
years,
just go
probably.
do it. You wouldn't talk
Right?
about it. You would just go do
I'd
it.
go do it, definitely. What I do get a sense of, and my feeling, and through everything that I've seen in the past, knowing that every time we have a technology like this hits a global scale, there's shockwaves that disrupt what's been happening before, etc. So it's going to take a long time until not only it permeates industries, but actually it's established in the industries and it takes its full impact, right? But I would say the next 2 years are going to be stabilization of what LLM technologies look like, how they're utilized, what their capabilities mean. We're still going to have very fast advance, very fast, Anthropic releases something today to, OpenAI something tomorrow. Then you have Llama, and then you have Gemini, and then you have the likes of Mistral, and just people just iterating on the iteration, right? At some stage, and I'll just say one more thing. I think if you look back at media, the first time that digital media was used, it was essentially reproducing analog media in digital formats, right? You took an ad and you created a banner, which because that's the logical thing to do. But the real sort of step forward is when you got to real-time bidding engines that actually take data in real time to customize the ad and know what's going to work better to generate a better outcome. So I think we've not hit that moment yet with LLMs and specifically with AI. I think that's going to be unlocked. What I can see is, and I completely believe in this, is I think the paradigm is not going to be the amount of people that work for a company, it's the amount of people that use AI technologies and augmentation of their capabilities. So, for instance, if I look at a marketing team, I can very quickly see probably brands like Unilever won't need for every brand a marketing team of between 7 and 20 or 30 people, right? They probably will need 4 or 5. And those 4 or 5 aided by the tools that now they don't have to ask for IT help to build a new feature, to incorporate a new channel. There's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to happen. Getting your data right, obviously, accessible, um, getting continuous feedback loops, not only in your processes, but in your insights and data systems as well. And having transparency around how these tools behave at scale as well. I don't think we've seen that, right? All we've seen is, consumer versions of ChatGPT, et cetera. We've not seen, 5 sectors with combined group of 10 million users using a system like SAP, for instance. Like, what is that going to look like in that period? So I think what we will need more help with is there is a journey that people and humans will need to do to be able to operate at that level, right? Because I doubt it that building on, for instance, when you become a graduate at a consulting firm, first few years are going to be, okay, manage this Excel spreadsheet for project management, or fill in the timesheets from all of the team, tell me how much we're spending, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it feels like a, a pretty useless way to leverage talents of people that have studied, for, I don't know, 20 years and top of their class, and that's what we expect them to do. So I suspect we need to spend more resources on getting our current resources ready. So I suspect the shift from technical people doing these bits and pieces because technology is not still fully mature and linked will sort of give place to people to manage the people that work for the company and the people that are our clients, right? Because why should we have people that, when you go into a store and want to buy a device, why do you go to the people and say, oh, do you have this available, this model available? That's a bit of a silly question. I would rather have the conversation of, I'm thinking about these 2 models, but, I have this thing, which one do you recommend? And the problem right now is those people are there and half of their time they're counting stock, making sure the references are in the right place, making sure the products are put back in the right place, etc., rather than becoming the experts that can then advise people and upsell and cross-sell other services, etc. on top. So I think on one hand, human plus machine is going to take over the enterprise, and those are going to be the people that are executing things. This means a leadership structure is probably going to be much more an orchestration role of how does this work across different teams to manage a unit of the business. I think leadership styles are going to have to change as well, right? Because one of the other things that is paramount here is the access to information needs to be transparent and democratized. For all of this to work, we can't keep having a leadership by only I have access to those numbers. So only I actually know how to make those decisions. So um, so yeah, so more of a shift in roles to how do we manage the people? How do we get them ready to operate in this new mode? And how do we get them the skills for them to be able to share their workload with machines and systems? And but much leaner for sure. I'll
I think
pause
it's
there because
interesting.
there's a lot of different notes in here.
Yeah, so I want to pull on a couple threads. The first one is maybe the last note that you mentioned, which is more transparent information. And so I get why you would want that. The more available information is, the more that these tools, that AI, Gen AI, just in general, you can have higher impact because you can pull
Yeah,
information from disparate sources, you can aggregate it, you can make it drive towards action. Doesn't that go against kind of the desire within corporate America to have control and to almost have job security? If I know things that other people don't know and I'm the
of
boss,
course.
then sure it's less efficient, but it gives me individual security and safety. So like how do you reconcile those two?
It's a great question. I think the easy answer is I don't know because I've not seen anyone deal with it in an effective way. Because, like you say, the prime condition is for me to retain control. So, for instance, I do a lot of training for across all levels of the organization, right? And it's funny when you work with operational people that do a lot of stuff on a daily basis. Um, they essentially are all focused around I have 10 things to do every day. Two of them I hate because they are boring and they're a waste of time and it's just inefficiency. Other two I would love to do, but I just don't have the time because I have so much stuff on my plate. And the other six, I mean, there's definitely a better way to do this, right? Why am I wasting so much time doing this?
They have the exact
And
pain, they know exactly what their pain is, and they
they
just
know
need help
exactly
and
what their
solutions.
pain is, right? And that's why but then again, they know the pain, but they don't know the technology, so you can't ask them what they want, right? We go back to the faster horses versus cars. And they will ask for faster horses because they don't know what a car looks like. So they need help in figuring that out. If I look at running the same exercise with leadership, leadership is almost like, um, well, I have this strategic objective. It doesn't really force me to one do a lot of effort to share a lot of information, but it's something that if you actually succeed, it's going to make me look really well and it's going to get me my next promotion, right? And then the next conversation is, okay, can you share your sales history, your figures across regions and across departments for the past 2 years? Like, whoa, I don't know if I can share that information. That's highly confidential, right? Like, well, if you want to train a model, right? Are we going to train it on the quarterly reports or are we going to train it on the actual numbers? Because the quarterly reports are the message that the people that are on top want to put out there for
Yeah, it's
a
structured, it's
purpose.
massaged, it's perfect. Yeah.
It's either for investors or for shareholders or for um, PR purposes and perception. But then the real numbers sometimes tell a different story, right? And I remember one workshop I ran with middle management, which is where this all breaks down. Because if it was one or the other, it wouldn't be perfect, but at least we would get somewhere. But then with middle management, you almost have this constant negotiation of, well, I really want this, but I need to be careful because I can't step on that,
It's
that
like the
guy's
politics
territory.
dance of what
The
they're
politics
comfortable
stance
doing.
of stasis, right? In which
Yeah.
let's just keep it as it is because at least it works. It works poorly, but it works. So
And it's a known and certain thing versus this unknown and high risk,
that's
or
exactly it.
not even
It's
high
the
risk,
evil.
just
Yeah,
riskier
yeah.
for me.
It's the devil I know, right? And the
Yeah.
devil that I'm used to dealing with, and the devil I have my own secret Excel spreadsheets to actually know how to deal with it, right? Well, which is funny. Um, and so I almost think that the biggest challenge happens because there is this dissonance across the different layers of organizations. That's very difficult to deal with. I would say what really helps is to have a strong leadership structure that is oriented around the success of the company, right? I know this sounds very silly, but I think anyone that works in consulting knows that, even though this supposedly this is the ground rule, but it's not. It doesn't always manifest like that, right?
It's the thing that
Um,
everyone always agrees to, but then when it comes down to actually taking action to align with that, everyone's like, well, I don't know.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's if you take the example of partner-based consulting models, right? Yeah, they're a big company with loads of partners, but at the end of the day, it's the partner's bonus that's going to matter. So
Yes.
if my decision is between losing 20% of my bonus to benefit all of the partners in the company from me having 20% more bonus and buying that seventh vacation holiday home, then I'm going to go for the seventh holiday home, right? Um, so so yeah, so the metrics. It's interesting because we've been circling around this. The metrics are ultimately the thing that make a difference, right? And if companies keep measuring on outputs and dollar value and ranking, then we're going to keep having the same behaviors, and hence by a technology that's just going to make things more efficient. So, it's almost like that dystopic job loss that's coming is done for the wrong reasons, right? And it's going to leave big companies in a very precarious way to be able to keep the pace of dealing with this need for transformation. And so coming back even to the 20 years, the companies that sort of take this stance probably will be challenged by some of those smaller companies with employees that actually know exactly how to solve the problem, and they leave the company and open their own company because guess what? They don't need a tech team to build a service. They can build it with their 5 or 6 people that they worked and someone that helps them with technology. Um, so
It's almost
I
like
think
the larger companies need that existential threat and that pressure in order to transform, and they won't transform
yes,
otherwise.
yes. I suspect in the next 10 years, we'll have a few Nokia type press conferences happening. I don't know if you remember the moment in which, I think it's 2011, the CEO of Nokia giving a press conference saying, we did nothing wrong, yet we still lost. And the guy's in tears. And you're like, well, if you still lost, then obviously you did something wrong. You just didn't
The
see it.
fact
You
that he
didn't,
didn't know or they
yeah.
didn't know that they did nothing wrong shows that they did something wrong and not
It just
adapting.
shows the corporate machine just builds
Yeah.
this distorted version of reality. But outside, there's a whole world transforming around you, right? So it's the analogy of the guy that's going to build the fastest running tires for cars, and suddenly they haven't realized that, cars now fly. It's been 2 years. They don't need wheels anymore. They need a landing gear. You should have pivoted, my friends, but it's too late now. So yeah, so I think that culture is something that is still quite difficult to address in both sides of this coin, actually.
Kind of pulling on that culture thread. So I have had a few conversations with large companies that are generally considered innovative. Workday is an example, one that I can share, and
Yeah.
kind of other large enterprises, sometimes private, sometimes public, that are, for all intents and purposes, tech companies, right? They're kind
Mm.
of tech forward. They're thinking about technology innovation. They understand agile and proper methodology for building things, and yet there's almost this gap of leadership wants to have AI and understands on some level that this is valuable and our competition is going to do it.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what we're doing here. And then like you said, the people, the operational people that are in the trenches doing the work say, I have so much work to do. I would love some things that improve and make my life better. That, when you describe it in abstract, it sounds great. And then you have this middle management resistant aspect of, well, I don't know. I don't know. The thing that I find I'm incredulous about is I've had these conversations time and time again where it's almost as if everyone is very excited about Gen AI and AI capabilities and kind of the lowering of the cost to enter into building technology. And ChatGPT was so cool, and we're going to build so much stuff. And then over the past 12 months, 6 months, I've had these conversations, and people are saying, yeah, we were all excited about it, but we haven't really done anything. And now it's not really being talked about. And when I talk to employees about it, they say, yeah, I tried it out, a year and a half ago, but I don't really use it. I don't use it in my day to day work, and it's like it's just kind of fallen flat in terms of the actual applications of it. Everyone's talking about it,
Yeah.
but there's very little action being done towards
Mm.
where can we empower our troops and our people in the front lines to use these tools.
Yeah.
Is that kind of that middle management kind of dampening it, or is it some other reason why there's little adoption?
That's a great observation. I think I see exactly the same happening. I suspect there's a number of different things that we can sort of pick up on to sort of do a little bit more forensic analysis on why we've gotten where we've gotten. Um, I'll start that it's even though it was great to have the hype of last year in terms of AI, Gen AI, et cetera, getting people paying attention to it. Finally, it was like a top three topic on boards of large organizations. But unfortunately, it was a topic of conversation that was as fledgling as the effort made to actually understand what it means for companies, right? And in many cases, we've had companies announcing, billion-dollar investments in we are going to transform with Gen AI, blah, blah, blah. But what that means is they've bought Microsoft Copilot or they bought
And
ChatGPT
they built
Enterprise
a
Plan.
chat bot, a rag chat bot somewhere.
And newsflash, chatbots have been around for quite a while. And just that bit doesn't really solve anything, right? You need to have a clear understanding of where you're going to invest energy and time to learn what the impact can be. It's not just, it's almost like how consulting firms solve problems, which is this business unit is not running too well, throw more bodies at it. Let's hire 200 people and they'll sort it out. And you're like, no, they won't. This is not about more bodies. This is about the right approach with the right continuous model to be able to go from this is a problem, this is a potential solution, this is we're building something to demonstrate it works, to this is how much it takes to build an enterprise solution, to this is the potential impact that it can deliver for us. Do this, 20, 30 times across key areas where we have burning platforms, operational problems, et cetera, which again, those operating levels, they know about these problems, and then bring it back up and say, okay, these are the things that we think the technology can do. Where do we invest? How do we make them work to deliver that impact? Rather than ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, and people will sort it out. They will have a 10% increase in productivity if they use those tools. What they missed out is that, like the small trends, if it's actually configured to help them do what they need to do, right?
Buying the tool does not
So,
necessarily mean it's going to be useful and helpful. You have to
and it's going to
actually
be
think
adopted,
about how
right?
you're using it. Yeah.
I remember the metric in the software market back, this is the 2014 number, which is 60% of all enterprise technology does not get used. This is
Wow.
astronomical, right? I suspect the number today is not going to be that far as well if you talk about big enterprises. But if you think about that challenge specifically, it's just been the very superficial sort of PR driven, and that's why it was a hype phase. What I also think is, I think we're in that valley of disillusionment, but I think we're going to have a lot of examples of how it works at scale, coming maybe not from the enterprises, but from outside of the enterprises, which means there's going to be a wave of new solutions with this AI native sort of structure of less people, more nimbleness, more quick, fast adaptation that are going to be hitting enterprises and first enabling them. But at some stage, some will become big and will start challenging the companies that they're serving as well. So, yeah. So I think that's definitely something that I see happening in the next few years.
From a use case perspective, either something that you've helped a company plan and build or something that you've read, do you have any particular scenarios or examples that you think are really shining stars of, yes, this is how you should be approaching AI. They built
Yeah.
something, it actually is driving value. This is an example that we should set the standard by to emulate.
So I have one that has a series and it's hands-on. So there's a series of lessons of what not to do, and there's a few success examples of things that are moving forward in the right way. I can't divulge who that company is, but I can talk through the patterns of each of the phases, right?
Like, can
And
you
again,
say, is it a
one,
large company, medium sized, small company?
it's a small scale up that got bought, essentially got
Okay.
acquired, and when they got acquired, they lost the commercial sort of element of their business, and they became a delivery engine for a big corporate, right? Um, and it's astonishing to see the patterns on all of the stages of development of AI products, on how they're so clearly you need to do it, otherwise that you will have start accumulating that then piles up, right? And so if we start with how do you identify those use cases, you know, most of the companies that I've spoken to, they've taken pretty much an RPA style spreadsheet of use cases across functions that say, you
RPA
know,
being robot process automation, kind of old
process
school.
automation. Yeah, sorry. Too many years in consulting, too many acronyms. Um, but yeah, so if you deploy these technologies in these departments, you can cut X% of the heads in those departments. So again, here we go. We talk about, responsibility and transparency and um, social impact. And we're making decisions based out of a spreadsheet that tells us how many heads we can cut, right? We're not even thinking about two fundamentals, which are part of those patterns we need to really understand to make the right decisions on use cases. One is this is a probabilistic technology, which means it does not know anything. It just has a high probability of guessing what that thing is going to be, which means you can trust it up to 80, 90, maybe 95%. But there's 5% that someone that knows what they're talking about needs to go there and make an actual decision on. So
Yeah,
that's
that
the start point.
human plus machine, that human oversight
Absolutely.
of the guessing
Absolutely.
of the machine.
Until someone comes up with the right technical framework for AGI, this will be the case, right? But talking about that initial, so the first is what the technology is and what the limitations are, realizing that. Secondly is identifying what are the patterns of inefficiency in communication, in interpretation of written text, which typically was very difficult to transform into numbers. But because of the technology, we can fluently translate language with codes, with even numbers, even though numbers you need a little bit of technical work to make them trustworthy. So let's look at the processes. What are the things that we're doing 1,000 times? Reading the same type of document, extracting information, the same information, right? I want to read 1,000 contracts and I want to extract the same numbers and I want to put them on an Excel spreadsheet and I want someone to tell me what are the outliers. And then in those outliers, go and tell me why they're outliers. So go and read those contracts again and extract what are the things that make them different from all of those. This is something that is humanly impossible to do unless you have 5,000 people in, I don't know, the Philippines or India or another outsourcing market doing this at very cheap prices. With this technology, you can actually scan and then you can make that available for someone to go in and validate the logic, right? So this is one of them. The other one is communication in between stakeholders. So, for instance, I have a product release, I have a feature, and that feature impacts both my end clients, it impacts the admins of the platform on my side, and it impacts the IT teams that are going to try to implement that technology in a client. I would need to have three groups of people working on how to message and position this for these different stakeholders. Whereas now I can have a couple of people or one in each bucket actually just verifying the nuances of what each of those groups needs to be told, right? So multi-level, multi-layered communications is the second one. The third one is basically verification against standards and policies. Something that, for you to know if you're doing something right, let's say, in when you're um, putting together your tax forms, you need to know a lot of legislation, right? You need to know a lot of regulation. You need to know a lot of the information that makes up of a company to then know what are the rules you apply. How do those vary from, taking the US as example, state to state? How do those vary between different business units that are part of my business and then different geographies? And typically, someone very experienced knows how to really navigate two or three of these aspects, but not all of them at the same time, right? So now you can digest this and have, again, an expert or a group of experts going through it and picking what are the best suggestions, what is the best way to deal with those patterns. To the point that if you think about how this is done today, you probably have armies of people reading contracts and extracting information, putting them on an Excel spreadsheet again. So it's the bane of
We love
every
Excel.
big enterprise. We love Excel. I love Excel, right? um, and then prone to generating errors, prone to someone that goes and looks at all of that, doesn't have all of that background information to do that. So they will make a partial best decision, right? So this is another great pattern to apply. I have to check for compliance. I have to check for any things that I might have missed against standards, regulation, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and if you think about these three patterns, anything that on top of this has an interaction that is a conversation, that is leveraging other types of data, but needs to be interchanged into a logical debate and negotiation, this is ripe for use cases. So if you present these patterns in almost like a workshop mode with users and potential personas as part of those products or solutions you're designing, very quickly, and I've sort of spent the last decade doing design, using design thinking as the key tool to bring all of the different specialties together of experience SMEs, technology stakeholders, data stakeholders, strategists. Let's get all of those people collaborating. I think that's a great framework to bring them all together to shape use cases, but then being able to illustrate all of the layers. So if a process is a succession of steps, each of those steps has data and has systems that are required to actually complete that. They also have inputs and outputs. So if we map all of this and then we map how they succeed one another, what we're very quickly going to get at is there's probably 30, 40, 50% of that that's going to become obsolete because you won't have people copy pasting stuff between systems or populating spreadsheets or reading 200-page documents for every single one of the clients they need to take care of. And secondly, there is a decision to be made, which is how much do you want to stretch the limits of how much they can change that process, right? And there's almost like these three key dimensions. One is let's improve what people do today and maybe accelerate or automate part of it. Let's then, second level is let's now remove some of the steps because we can confidently do that. And all we need to do is verify the steps rather than do them manually. And then the third stage is let's actually redesign the process because it doesn't make sense for someone to go through all of these steps. They can just come at the end and say, okay, for these 5 ones missing, show me all of the evidence. And they can do that thought process and review it for those 5 outliers, but everything else is carried out in an automated way. So if we line up these steps with all of this information, and then we follow this logic to redesign that process, and then have the horizons of change that we want to make, and what the impact is across all of those different domains, very quickly we're going to have 10x type use cases that have an impact not only on cost, but also on customer satisfaction, on retention, on lifetime value, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where the big change for companies that have invested and curating their enterprise data and getting it ready, this is where they will reap those rewards. Because the more information, quality information you have, the better you will be training these models and reorchestrating these um, processes to deliver all of the value you've accumulated as an enterprise to be better than everyone else, right?
I think
Otherwise,
that's
otherwise you will be as good as everyone else using those tools, which is not really a differentiated thing in the long term, right?
yeah. I mean, I think it's really fascinating how you break down. I mean, obviously that's dense, right? But just
It's
to
very
kind
dense.
of
It's a big PowerPoint slide with a lot of information.
clearly you've thought a lot about it though, right? I mean, this
Yeah,
you said design
too
thinking
much
for
probably.
many years. But starting with, first of all, you can't have an educated conversation about solutions or even problems if you don't understand the limitations of the technology, right? And so
Correct.
starting with anchoring, this is a guessing tool. It's very good at guessing, but you still need that human in the loop to kind of review,
Yeah.
approve, etc. And then from a process perspective, do you typically, when working with companies or working with people, guide only to these three kind of buckets of area of communication, of kind of gathering information and distilling it down? And I forget the third use case, but do you try to stay within these swim lanes to frame the
No,
conversation when
no,
talking
no,
about
no, no. This is the starting point, right? I
starting
think
point?
the education of people needs to be done bidirectionally. So I can't give all of the solutions to someone. I need to give them a little bit of the solution and then allow them to sort of get the breakthrough in, and then they will start thinking about what the next stage of the solution is. And they will start identifying those use cases really quickly, right? So it's typically when in a workshop, let's say a couple days workshop, the first day is it's a grinding exercise to get everyone with the energy to actually even face what this means. On the
Yeah.
second day, everyone comes with ideas that they've thought about in the evening or in the morning,
And you
right?
structured it
They're,
right, so you have this kind of framework where it's like, this is
yeah,
the shape of a problem, go find problems that make sense to you that fit within these shapes. And then you kind of have that generative aspect going forward of
yes,
people thinking, well, let me reflect on my own world, what do I do, what
yeah,
kind of fits as a candidate into
yeah.
this?
And this is why this is going to be a transformation in waves, right? It's going to be an iterative exercise. And I think we are only starting on the first iteration of that. But then the people that are on the ground doing this day in, day out, they're the ones that are going to have the real insights. But the big difference is they will have the power to reconfigure those tools to be able to keep evolving them into the next iteration, right? And this is the big game changer of the technology. Now, the problem is that means we need to convince people to take the time to be educated and to want to change the way things happen, right? So the people that get left behind are not the ones that think they're bad at what they do. And this is so interesting as a psychology of whenever you start a workshop. I once in the first half hour had two people walk out on a workshop, like, mid-senior, almost executive people walk out on a workshop with an energy company because they felt deeply threatened by all of this of information being transparent, technology taking away the manual part of the, and
I feel like they're
but
being eliminated, or
but they
talking
were
about their
eliminating
demise.
themselves by not wanting to hear about it, right?
Right.
Because all of the team that stayed, the next day they came back and they said, well, apologies, we heard from the rest of the team that we shouldn't have left, and we just want to sort of be a part of the solution. The thing is, in a big enterprise, not everyone will have the opportunity to do that, right? And if you just resist and say no, that's going to place people in a very difficult position to
Kind of
actually do that.
self selects almost of those who are
it's
willing to
it's
innovate and
darwinistic.
grow.
It's going to be
Yeah. Yeah.
darwinistic. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I think
um
the other piece that you mentioned, which I just want to highlight as well, is the companies that are actively taking steps now to improve the quality, accessibility, cleanliness of their data are that's work that can be done today, regardless of if you have the correct transformation of AI, or if you have the design thinking, whether you have the
yeah,
solutions and the problems, you can do that today. And so, and that's a known thing, right? Structured data, building data lakes, data warehouses, ETL pipelines, integrating more data to have a graph database, like that is all known information and processes. And you could start doing that today while you're still maybe mucking around and trying to figure out, well, how do we get our team members to be generative and
Yeah.
think about AI applications?
Yeah.
That's very insightful.
Yeah. It's, I think, in 2012, I worked for Telefonica, and there was a spinoff from Telefonica called Dynamic Insights. And it was built to leverage anonymized and aggregated footfall data generated by call logs from people's cell phones and start
Footfall
understanding.
data? What is footfall data?
So footfall is how many people are in a specific location at any given point in time. And then using machine learning to figure out whether they came from, how long did they stay there, where did they go next, right? And then match other data, like what are the business around there? What is the probability that that person, if they stayed for 2 hours in that location and there's a movie next door, probably they went to the movies, right? So there's a lot of assumptions that you can do on this. The other thing is if you have a group of 70 people moving at 20 miles per hour across London, probably they're on a bus. If you have 90 that go in a metro station and come out on the other side of the metro station, they probably took the tube. So there's tremendous amount of insights you can generate. And again, no surveillance or whatsoever in this. This is all aggregated and anonymized. But the collective insights of this are tremendously valuable for a retailer that I want to decide where to open my store. And I sell this type of product to this type of audience. Where do they come from? Which areas do they go for lunch? At what time do they there you go. So all of that is hyper valuable information. And this was in 2012. So a long time ago, this data commercialization enterprise, which was a huge learning journey for me and almost like the full pivot into the data and AI world, which I then carried out through IBM, Accenture, KPMG, etc. That sort of gave me a perspective of the value of the data is not just selling the data or sharing the data. It's actually understanding at which different stage of the stack, as I like to mention it, can it generate value? And I'll give you an example. So if we think about a business that gathers insights on, for instance, tire wearing, right? How long will a tire in a specific truck, and that is part of a fleet? How long will it live for? How long will it run for? When will you need to replace that tire? Can you do anything to extend the life of that tire, right? Now, is this applicable to the whole fleet? Because probably it's going to be 2 or 3 different models of trucks with specific profiles that we can figure out of driving styles. So the value of that data is not only in I can save money that I spend on tires, but also I know I'm going to have less carbon emissions because I'm consuming less of the tire threads. But I also know that I can retrain some of my drivers that have a more aggressive driving and actually consume more of the tire in every single journey. And that has an impact on the other two. But on top of it, I can actually inform the tire manufacturers which type of tire is best for which type of fleet, right? They might not like that because probably they will sell less tires because they're still incentivized. When you come back to the tyranny of metrics, they're still incentivized to actually sell more tires, right? But there's a multi-dimensional analysis of the impact and the value of data. First, for how you run your operations. Secondly, for how your clients run their operations and make deliveries. Thirdly, for the whole ecosystem of companies that sell services that somehow tie to the use of that assets that you have data on, right? With the advent of AI, we have a new dimension to explore, which is the model that I built for that specific tire consumption that can analyze all of these different dimensions and come up with an optimization factor that can probably be applied to door handles. It can be applied to winches. It can be applied to paint jobs. It can be applied to a number of things. But how do you get access to marketplaces where you can sell those? And you go look at what all of the software platforms and the hyperscalers are doing. They're building model marketplaces. So businesses that think they can leverage the research work you've done on building that model, training that model, they can be commercialized there for other businesses. So this is a whole new dimension. I mean, imagine building a company of people that all they do is build models and publish them on these marketplaces, right? And the entry fee is go to a company, ask for their historic data, get it cleaned and ready, build a model, and then share the profits with them. This could be a viable business. We could have a marketplace of models that then goes sell those models across AWS's marketplace, Microsoft's marketplace, um, any of those other ones, right?
That's super. Snowflake's marketplace. I know
Snowflake,
they have a
exactly,
big
exactly.
place. So do you feel this is hyper interesting to kind of think about this? You have the fundamentals of generating data so that you can do your business better, right? You can build models on it, and then where in the stack, where in the business, how many different things does it touch, and then what's the
Yeah,
impact that it can have? Is it a large impact or a small impact? But then, like you said, this extra dimension of, well, now you can build a model off of it. The model informed your business historically, but now you can take this model, you can expand it
yeah,
outwards and make, maybe now you're in the data business. Now you're selling models.
exactly.
Do you do you think that there's going to be a leaning towards one or the other of more companies or more marketplaces saying, here's a model, you can license my model? Or is it going to be data marketplaces, which is, hey, here's my anonymized data set, you can have my data? Or is it going to be both, and both are equally valuable in different use cases?
That's a difficult one to answer. I think there's opportunities on both sides. I think there's a lot of different elements we need to factor in. One is the risk appetite across some of those industries. I would say the more in trouble they get, the more open they will be to trying those types of solutions. So, and the other thing is, I think the maturity level of how they go about trying to do that themselves is also going to be a key factor to determine that. The other factor to bear in mind is regulation, right? And we have the EU AI Act. The US has come up with recommended. They will come up with something more solid. Canada has a great starting point, in my opinion. We're going to have more of those frameworks coming out.
And that's like on primarily on the data side, at least as of
Data
right now,
side,
not the model side. Yeah.
not the model side, right? Just data. But I suspect those are going to have an impact on how do you approach these things. Um, so I think those are the things that are going to be having an impact on how this happens. I think some companies will, and this is almost like the next level of platform business models, right? And I remember, for instance, working with an energy company trying to, in the UK, we had this smart metering program, which was basically a debacle because there was no standard on what the hardware was. There was no standard on what the software was, and there was no standard to exchange the data and have a common set of standards, which means every company went with their own standards, and then suddenly they uh, came together and said, this doesn't work, we need to standardize the hardware, and then this doesn't work, we need to standardize the software, and then it takes 10 times the time that it should have taken and cost much more money. In that period, there was a pitch that we did, which was, so one of the biggest pains is to be able to position geographically an expert to go and install the smart meter, the right equipment for the type of installation you have in your home, and the right diagnostics to understand the level of effort to get it installed. Some were 15 minutes, technician comes in, plugs in the device, clicks a button, does some tests, calls to verify that it's connected to the network, and it's done. Others needed construction work, right? So what we thought was, okay, let's build this end-to-end flow in which we use conversational technology and image recognition to try and figure out what's the diagnostic, what type of installation is it going to be, what are we going to need, triage from there, and go to, okay, let's figure out availability. What are the slots available? And those slots need to combine availability of engineers and availability from the client side, right? And then match against the readiness of the type of installation to then, is it a one-man job with a small van, or is it a construction team to go there and spend a couple of days on getting it sorted. And we thought, if we're solving this for a company that has a quarter of the population in the UK in market share, and these are not the actual numbers, otherwise it's very easy to figure out who they are. um, we can actually open up that marketplace of combining engineers across the country and availability of hardware and client readiness in one system and have a marketplace that combines requirements, requests, inbound requests from any of the energy operators with the available hardware, with the available engineers and technicians. Same pool, rather than every company having to go and recruit hundreds of people, train them over the course of months or more, and then get them ready for them to go and do the installations successfully, and then first time installations that are successful. So that marketplace actually failed because there was no common data standards to be able to build this opportunity. This was a monetization opportunity, right? Because there was something here to then have a common approach by all of the operators. Sharing their data doesn't mean they made money. It means they would probably be able to deliver that program at a tenth of the cost and at a tenth of the time, right?
And if all the
Which,
competition's doing it, then and they don't, then they're going to fall behind.
because this was regulator mandated, so they needed to do it, otherwise they would pay
Oh,
fines,
right,
which
right.
they're still paying today. So I almost see like this opportunity of the data, the information marketplaces being there, which means companies at some stage will become more sophisticated in how they decide to tackle technology. Right now, it's first reaction of a big corporate is we can build it ourselves. We have a wonderful engineering team. We have the best brains in the industry. We can sort this out and do something. It's going to take 5 years and cost 100 million. Okay, that's not where we are from the capability of technology. So some businesses, I suspect, are going to start to be more strategic and make a decision. Do I buy? Do I build? Do I partner with someone to actually get this done? And that will apply to data as well. So it could be more productive for them to ask for a specialist company to come in and take over the role of let's figure out how to fix the data and how to make it work for us. And then just buy the technology, build the systems, get it running, right? Rather than big enterprise transformation with hiring a lot of people and then
Trying to figure out how to
negotiating
do it
priorities.
themselves. And
Exactly, right?
yeah,
Because I don't know if you remember, about 10 years ago, every company said we need to become a technology business, right?
yep.
Nowadays, every company
Cloud
will say,
infrastructure and data and
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. They will say we are going to be a data business, right? So
yep,
we
yep.
still have a hype curve to go through, which is that one. Um, but I suspect there's going to be a lot of space for those two models to come to life. And I think once the data is there, there is going to be some of the old platform models that failed. They're going to come back as opportunities because with that data available to be used, leveraged, I think that will that will have an impact in terms of what companies decide to do. The final element I'll call out is consumers, citizens, patients, et cetera, et cetera. I think people are not even close to being educated enough to understand the difference between someone that's trying to leverage your data to make a buck from someone that is actually trying to use your most personal information to help you get something that addresses specifically your needs, right? And I think that's where that transparency is going to be paramount for some businesses
I
to
think
emerge that
I
do
think that's
that.
a really interesting lens actually, because we've been conditioned, especially in the the 2010s with Facebook. I think really Facebook, but other companies as well, to be afraid of any company asking for data.
Mm.
And it's like this fear of, if I'm getting something, then they're getting my data, and that's bad. And so
Yeah.
getting away from that and learning that there, just like any tool, right? There can be people who use things to, you know, harm you, or that are
Oh yeah,
not
of
to your
course.
benefit, I should say, versus they can use
Hmm.
things for you to benefit you. And data is one of those tools where it can be extremely valuable if used appropriately, ethically, to enhance you, the consumer's life.
Yeah.
Or if it's used to manipulate your purchasing decisions, that's maybe negative.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, every technology has bad actors, right? Everything
Yeah.
in the history of mankind, everything is used for both good and bad. Um, I mean, I don't know if a bit of naivete on my side, but I do believe that in the greater balance, um, good companies trying to do positive things for people will always trump bad things. Uh, Good pun there, by the way. Um, so, um, I'm thinking that this is going to be the same. I think this is going to happen much quicker though, and I think some of the big companies are going to be caught off guard. But I'll come back to summarize some of the highlights, which always land on the same thing. It's people, right? It's people understanding how much better they can do. It's people understanding what they can get in exchange for something. It's people accepting that they need to give up a little bit of control to actually, for the, let's say the greater good of their businesses to start with. Um, so that's still the big challenge. We are still the big challenge of technology. It's humans. It's not the
Surprise,
other way around.
surprise.
Technology is easy,
Yeah.
right? It's just a reflection of us. It's pretty basic and pretty confusing. Um, but um, but I think we'll get there. So I'll bring back one of the points from Jan LeCun's interview. He's the I think VP of AI at Meta, and in his interview he mentioned something very interesting, which is it took a philosopher to come into Google to actually figure out what to start doing with AI, which was Demi Zassavis. Um, so I think there's a lot of different elements to extract from this. We're still so focused on the technology that we haven't figured out that it's people that are not bound by the limitations of technology that are going to figure out how to deploy this technology effectively. And again, I'm a bit biased because, essentially I do everything except the coding. Uh,
Yeah.
but but there is just so much lost in translation in those bridges in between what developers and statisticians actually do and what a business needs, what a user experiences, and what those gaps then mean to the outcome. So I think that's something that we'll probably see a shift, and probably that's a big area that we're still not there, but I suspect every business of every kind will need that type of support. And it's probably not going to be a very technical, deeply technical person that spends their days testing models, right? Probably going to spend their days tweaking or some type of, low code, no code tool to help all of their salespeople do something better, right? And work with them day in, day out to make sure that that keeps improving.
Hugo, this has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours,
We could.
but I think we shall wrap it up here. I know you've had a
Yeah,
long day.
absolutely.
If people want to talk with you more, learn more about what you're working on, learn about human plus machine, where should they go?
Yeah, the website humanplusmachine.io, LinkedIn. I mean, I'm an avid consumer of information, either podcasts, books, mostly audiobooks, and information from certain people in the industry. I typically tend to, publish my own sort of discovery from some of my work, and I share a lot of information. Um, so just reach out via LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, and then we have a multitude of channels to actually continue communicating on. Yeah, and companies of all sizes, right? I do a bit of everything. So work with startups, work with an educational organization as a trustee as well, um, and work with big corporates. So don't be shy. Share your ideas. Call me out. Tell me where I'm wrong. I love learning. So
It's a
this is the only
conversation,
way
right?
to
All of it's
actually
a
do.
conversation and
It's all a
getting in and
conversation.
experimenting.
Yeah, and it never ends. So we better get started soon.
Exactly. Hugo, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Elijah. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.